Welcome to the White Paper Review. I'm Brian Boys. I'm a copywriter and author of How to Write a White Paper in One Day. And in case you don't know, this the gentleman next to me here is Gordon Graham, author of hundreds of white papers and white papers for dummies. I want to get the title of your book. We're just going to get to it quickly. Gordon has done an incredible thing by using AI to write a white paper. And for this first segment, we're going to talk about what we like about it, because it's kind of impressive right now what AI can do for this kind of writing. So, Gordon, I'm just going to toss it to you. I want, first of all, kind of tell me why you decided to do this, and then kind of go through what it took very briefly to get a draft of this thing.
Okay, well, before we show you anything, we can talk about that for a bit, I guess. It was an experiment, because as soon as ChatGPT came out, people started asking it, what it could do, what it couldn't do. Well, sure, it can do short things. It can do blog posts, but could it do longer things? Could it do a white paper? People asked it, and it kept saying no. And I asked it a few times, and it kept saying no. And then one time I asked it, and it said, sure. And I was like, all right, they must have tuned it up or something. Now it can do them. It's not ever great. And so, as an experiment, I did this. I did this white paper in the most logical format that there is, which is a numbered list, right? So it didn't write it in one big spew. I wrote it section by section, and it would do 400 or 500 words, no problem at all, But it does tend to you do have to push it to get that many words.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
And by the way, this was ChatGTP, right?
Yes, ChatGPT.
GPT. I'm saying it wrong. Okay. That's because you work with
the
and so it knew, it became aware. Yes, I can write a white paper. I'm coming for your job, Gordon.
So let's look at this experiment. I just gave it the topic, and I wondered if it would resist, if it would get snarky. I said, tell me all the reasons why you shouldn't use ChatGPT to write a white paper. And it just went, blah, blah, blah. Here's 9 reasons. And they were all pretty solid. They were all pretty good reasons, I thought. So I just took the outline that they did. And we'll do a walkthrough here now. I did the design just in Word, very, very basic, the idea of a broken screen, and it's like, but there's a kind of irony to this whole thing that the AI is writing about why it can't write. And, I thought that was kind of funny. So we'll show a 2-page spread on the screen here. I stuck in some highlighting at places, which I wanted to make people notice that there's an afterword. I wrote the afterword. So ChatGPT wrote about 3,250 words, all the way from what you see here, introduction, all the way to about the author. And then I wrote the part after that. See, about the publisher, I'm the publisher, and the afterword. And I did 2 versions of this. So the first version I did in February, the second version I did in March. And I'll tell you the difference. But I said to it, you understand the parts of a numbered list, white paper. Oh, yes, I understand. Can you write an introduction that lists the 9 things? Here it was. And then for each one, it had a number and a certain argument. I put in those little graphics with a little pull quote just for something. So don't mind the design. This wasn't a proper professional design or a AI design. It's just me and using Word. But
I like the design. I'll tell you what, it's good. It's not a bad design. So
I hope it's readable.
Yeah, it's a good. I would. Yeah. Again, we compare this to so many white papers we've seen. This is like, wow, this is better than middle of the pack in a number of ways.
And so it wrote right to about the author, and then it goes into the afterword. And I'll show you quickly the sources. Okay, so this was a big thing. Are we going negative or positive in this video?
We're gonna first we're gonna talk about what we liked about the white paper.
Okay.
And then we can there's going to be a second segment, viewers, which will come out quickly after this, and we're going to talk about some of the problems. We need to go a little more in depth with that.
Okay. So, well, what I liked, I can say, is it banged off 3,250 words, which was, I think, a full-length white paper. It came up with the outline. It came up with the topics, within seconds. there was I did no editing on this because I wanted to show people really what it did. And then as far as the research, I pushed it and pushed it. I'll tell you, I did 10 drafts, 150 prompts in several sittings. So if this was not push a button and you'll get a white paper, but each draft, it was better, it did improve, it did listen. And it was really like working with a very agreeable writing buddy. I found the experience, it didn't complain. It didn't say, you're overstating these problems. Really, I can do it. Look, I'm doing it right now. It didn't say that.
Did you specify how many words each section would be? Or
I had to push it.
Okay.
I would say
Okay.
I asked for 250, 350, 450. And it seemed to resist going much past 300, 350. There were times when I think I worked it pretty hard and it ran out of steam, so at times I would say, like, make this longer, and it would just give me basically the same thing back again.
Did you tell it to give you 9, or were 9
No,
what it suggested?
I just
Okay.
said,
Okay.
give me all the most important limitations of your capabilities for writing a white paper. And I can't argue with the list. Like, I think it's a good list.
Yeah, I would agree. Each of those was valid to me as I went through it. Yeah.
And I don't think there's much overlap. Maybe you could say emotions and understanding the target audience, but they're kind of different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
definitely.
and as far as the style, so the style, I would say, is clear, but not scintillating, not sparkling. It's bland, workmanlike. I've seen a lot of white papers that are worse style than this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very, I think it's got that tone. I'm style, I mean, sort of like how sparkling is it? Tone, it's got that authoritative tone that you want in a white paper, I think, right? Like, it's sounding like an expert. It's sounding like it knows what it's talking about. It's not doubting. It's not full of any crippling self-doubt or anything like that. It's not overqualifying things. It's saying, here it is, bing, 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 So
I felt like it overcomes, because AI is so focused, and it's really remarkable. It's really remarkable that it can do this with language, but it doesn't. Us human writers, we kind of forget what the definition of a white paper is, that it's a report. And so it can either, from the very beginning, it's really folksy and me and you, or it's absolutely not white papery at all. And so what was good about this, like a good beginning white paper writer, it remembered as it did it. It really remembered what a white paper is the whole way through. So that's an advantage over a human, I think.
I could tell you, Brian, I grilled it before this.
Okay.
I've grilled it like rather mercilessly. And so I asked it about its training data. I asked it if it knew me and my website. It said yes. So it had been trained on my website. I asked it if it knew my definitions of what a white paper was. Yes. And then I forget what I was going to say. Sorry, I'll have to edit
That's
that.
okay. I am going to jump in here and say, because after we had talked about this, because you'd asked it about you as an expert, so I went in and asked it later. This was like a couple of weeks ago. Hey, how much have you learned from Brian Boys about writing white papers? And it said, I am not aware of any white paper authority named Brian Boys. It was
that's
pretty
cool.
humbling. That's okay.
What? It wasn't watching YouTube? Where's it been on?
Okay.
Like,
well, I guess and it shows now. Also, it continues to learn, so it may have learned from that session to go, well, maybe I should go see if there's a Brian Boys out there. And I'm guessing you taught it, as you pushed it to do this, it's going to be a better white paper writer because you pushed it to do this. So,
well, hopefully, but I remember what I was going to say now. I asked it if it had been trained on white papers. Oh, yes.
Okay.
How many white papers? it can't tell me exactly. So then I played my little "is it bigger than a bread box" technique, and it ended up telling me that it was trained on many tens of thousands of white papers.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was 45 terabytes of training data up to the end of 2021,
Okay.
including tens of thousands of white papers. Now, most of them would have been academic,
Yeah.
right? They would have been technical and academic. It wouldn't have probably had a lot of B2B white papers, but it would have had some in there. It would have had some. So it's knowledge at this point of white papers is kind of slanted towards a more academic model, I would say, which is kind of its style. It's a little bit stodgy, but it's clear,
Yeah.
you know?
And as far as your work, I looked at the breakdown. And by the way, I want to tell you watching this, you can get this from Gordon. It's the white paper, and then even more valuable is his afterword, where he goes in depth about how he did it and what the limitations were. And to get it's free, but you do need to be signed up for his email list. So there will be we'll put a link below. You go and sign up for his email, where he's got a lot of great information anyway. But you can get a free. This is worth signing up. I mean, he could charge for this. This is so good. So anyway, just throwing that in there, and we'll remind you again at the end.
Well, thanks. So I think I had on the first draft like out of the 10, right? Probably towards the first 5, it had no sources, right? It was just stating these things baldly, and then I started
Okay.
pushing it for sources.
Okay.
ChatGPT, and so then it would throw in sources, and then I pushed it to do footnotes, and it did beautiful footnotes in my Chicago style that I like. It put little placeholders in the text. All I had to do was like paste the notes over as endnotes, in Word. So that took a few minutes, but really nothing
Oh
much.
man.
And I thought, wow, is it the holy grail? You can just ask it to research, and it does research, and the quotes looked pretty good. He had AI experts, and he had the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and he had Seth Godin. He had like people, like big name people, and I thought, this is fantastic. However, point number 3, it was trying to warn me, and I did not take heed. ChatGPT may mistakenly attribute a quote or fact to the wrong source. My bad. Then the first version, I took what it gave me, and it looked good, and it looked plausible, and it sounded reasonable. And this is why I think high school students can use it to write very plausible sounding, papers, and college students can probably use it to get C's or B's on their paper if their professor isn't sharp enough to really check things. So that's also something I suppose we could say is a positive. It's authoritative, sourcing that it just puts out there. And I have to say, those sources were so on point. They were fantastic.
I had, and I will.
Its original round of sources were perfect.
I too. Yeah, that was one of my things. It's one of the weaknesses I see when people either I go looking at white papers or people have me look at their white paper. It's wow, you just made an assertion here and there's no source. And I know that's a huge sticking point, a barrier, even for people that know how to write a white paper and have got a great subject and they just can't find the source, or they're like, they're kind of shoehorning in a source that doesn't really, it's not really apropos to your argument. That's really not the nail in the coffin, the
Yeah.
final word that really makes me a skeptic believe it. And this was like, this is so well sourced, and the quotes were like so on target to each of the points. I was really impressed. Now that
But
was
this is,
before
I
I
gotta
knew
tell you,
half of
Brian,
them or most of them were bogus.
I gotta tell you, this is version 2, right?
Okay,
So
okay,
out of it gave me 18 sources for the first version, of which 16 it had just made up. I'm pretty sure, because I found a person. I might find a book, I couldn't find that quote anywhere in the book. The next time it would do another draft, it would be a different book. It would be a different report. It would be a different page number. It would be a different person saying exactly the same thing. It would be the same person saying something different from the same book and the same page. It was just making it up. And I mean, that's a downside of ChatGPT. But I think to stay on the positive side, I did fortunately get in the waitlist on the new Bing that has ChatGPT built into it. And then I re-researched this using ChatGPT through the new Bing. And these news sources now are from Bing. And that took some time. I mean, I wasted some time there. That was probably the largest chunk of time on this whole project, was me having to throw out all the original research and redo it with Bing and learn how to use the Bing search function. But look at these sources now. These are better. These are even better than that. Look at this. It's talking about its risk of inaccuracies, and it's got a fantastic quote, you know, from a super expert. Then it's got another fantastic quote from a super expert. And how I got those in Bing was saying, like, find me 3 quotable quotes from AI experts about the risk of inaccuracies in content produced by ChatGPT. I said something like that, and Bing would just come boop, 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 boop,
Oh my gosh.
and then I would say, oh, okay, make me a footnote for number 2, boop, boop, boop. And then what I would do would be say to ChatGPT, then I'd go back to the ChatGPT plain interface and say, integrate this source into this draft and drop that other guy, right? So I said that. So it stuck these sources in by itself, you know, without me having to do it, and put the little footnote markers, and then I pasted in the markers from the new Bing. So if that's at all interesting to people, this is not plain Jane ChatGPT. This is ChatGPT with a research assist from the new Bing, which is also ChatGPT. So I thought I wanted to mention that. But
it's like having an assistant. It's like having an assistant. And by the
like
way, I have to say, for people wanting to try it, as we're releasing this video, the new Bing is not up. If you just go to Bing, it's not running it. So if you want to try it, you go to Bing, get on the wait list, and then like Gordon found, you can get in pretty quickly. But so go to try Bing, you go to well, in fact, we'll have a link below, but you go to Bing and you need to sign up, and then they clear you, they send you a message pretty soon that you can use it. Is that what your experience was?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks. It was a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And they're rolling it out as fast as they can. So, I mean, with that kind of workflow, the research problem goes away.
Yeah.
And the timing on this would have been even faster. So if I look at the timing for a minute, look at the steps in writing a white paper, right? The time to generate ideas. Well, that usually takes me thinking about it for at least half an hour, maybe a whole day, right? Until I get some idea, maybe a couple of days. It came up with the idea in seconds. Time to research it. Well, really, even if I include the new Bing, the time to research was like at most an hour.
Okay.
And I find the time to research a white paper like this, it would be days. It would be days to like find all these great quotes and all these books and scan through like a few books and all of these journals and pull out the perfect nugget. Like it just zoomed right in. Bing just zoomed right in. So that saved days. The time to the first draft. Okay, so my first draft was probably, let's say the version 1 was 5 drafts. Okay. That took an hour and a half to get to what looked like a pretty respectable draft. And that's with me pushing and doing stuff that didn't work and trying again and trying another way. An hour and a half to a first draft. A first draft of a white paper like this, I don't know, Brian, it would take me at least 15 hours. It would take me at least a couple of days.
3,200 words. Yeah.
And then the time to revise, to push through to the next 5 drafts and integrate the research was, I think, another 4 hours. So the total writing time for this, the total, research and writing time for this, and research time and learning curve was probably 1 day, probably 8 hours, really. So for me, say to somebody, if a client came and said, well, we want a white paper about 9-way, why ChatGPT is no good, I would be telling them that's going to take a few weeks. That's going to take 6 to 8 weeks. There's going to be a lot of research there to do. And then I would start trundling along with the research. Who are the experts in that field? What have they written? What have they said? It would probably take me at least 10 days. I don't know. I think to research and write this, I think that it's already 10 times as fast as a human. And it's like having, with that workflow with ChatGPT and the new Bing, it's like having two assistants. It's like having a research assistant and a writing assistant already. And they're happy and they never complain, and they always say, yes, I'll be happy to do you another version. I'll be happy to make that longer. I'll be delighted to make that shorter.
And another advantage to that is the morale of the writer, knowing it can be a slog when it's like, yikes, I've got to do this and this is hard. I just got to, nose to the grindstone to get these sources sometimes writing is very, very difficult. And this is like I don't know, a crutch, a forklift. It's like having a power tool that powers through, some of the toughest slog that can be so discouraging when you're writing a white paper. So there's a definite
Yeah,
benefit.
and the other thing I find, Brian, I don't know about you, but I go down a few rabbit holes. I do research that never shows up.
Yeah.
And look at this guy on page 7. Kei-Fu Lee is a noted executive who started up Google China and worked for Google, and has written several books, and has a fascinating life. Got cancer and had to reconsider his whole life. Fascinating guy. I bought his book and was reading his book for like a couple of hours, as part of my research phase, and that always happens. Luckily, I got a quote out of it, which is kind of a funny quote, but often I'll just be soaking up information about things that aren't going to find their way into the paper, and that's just part of being human. But the Bing just zeroes in, on the thing that you can pluck out and pull out. And I do think we should check those things, but checking them is a lot faster than like reading a book to try and find the best quote out of it. I mean,
so if I can, just with knowing these drawbacks, I came up with 4 things that I really like about this white paper that impressed me. Kind of surprising. So my first one was, I thought the writing is pretty good. It's not, like you said, it's not a great style, but it's got the right style at least. And so it's a little bit formal, but a white paper is a report. And so I think if you err a little to the formal, that's not as bad as erring to the informal, like the folksy, brochure copy. So I thought that was so the writing was like cogent. It doesn't look like, Google Translate from the old days, right? I thought that the list was pretty thorough. That's amazing. 9 things. I don't know if I could have come up with 9. And it seems like AI, if you're going to do a list white paper, that AI would be appropriate, at least an appropriate way to start it. And I suppose, and your thing, I guess the limitation there is, well, let's say you only wanted a 5-point, because sometimes 9 points, a lot of points to read in a white paper. People kind of like the 5 to 7 point thing, because it doesn't seem like, and so I guess that would be the question. How can we get it to be a little more in depth on fewer points? And maybe that we prompt it, you break the prompt up into, 0.5A and 0.5B and put them together. And then the third one was, I just thought it stayed focused on the topic really well. And I know we've seen in white papers where it tends to, humans, we get this thing where it's like, hey, this is too good to leave out, And we know that marketing departments, especially if there's a committee, it's like, so and so wants to throw this in, and this isn't really relevant. That's kind of a case study, or that's kind of a story or some sales stuff. But people kind of throw stuff in because it's too good to leave out, and they forget that it's you gotta strip away, because the point, it's a report and it's going from A to B, and this is kind of extraneous. And I found that it's everything that this wrote fit the white paper format. There was now you said you deleted some wordiness or whatever, but it really seemed to be on. It seemed to get what a white paper is. Um, and then finally, I said this before. The number four was it was like so well supported with industry quotes. I mean, it had more quotes than I would expect from a um, this is just great. Like the one just the pages we're looking here. There'd be multiple experts, like great experts talking specifically about the topic. So for those, those for those four reasons, I say, wow, AI does have a future, and for certain kinds of white papers, and with some human shepherding, it's pretty good. You could do a lot worse.
That's great, Brian. I want to point you to, it's true on these 2 pages. There's 3 sources on these 2 pages, and then there's those bullets that it came up with. That there was a source for I couldn't find, but say the one about 93% of all marketers.
Okay.
That was from a survey. Now its cutoff point was 2021, right? So I was trying to find something more recent, but that's not bad, 2020.
No.
And 93%. That, I mean, obviously, that means people agree with that. The one on the right I thought was really interesting, because this is the one that sort of hits home the hardest in some ways. The dangers of relying on AI is that it's sort of like garbage in, garbage out. And I was not aware of this, but Wikipedia has an acknowledged gender bias, and these sources under number 8 were from the original ChatGPT without Bing. It came up with both things, this Wikimedia Foundation report and this UNESCO report, all by itself. They were part of its training. So it seemed to be especially sensitive to this issue about bias and gender equality and cultural sensitivity. I didn't really even think of that. Like, I haven't really written too many white papers where I have to be especially sensitive to a different culture, but it was coming up with these examples about, and it was talking about writing for a global audience, which was really, really, really interesting. And then it had these three ways that bias can be introduced. And there was a report that I didn't bother quoting from directly, but this is the essence of it. If people think of bias as like, oh, well, it's trained on garbage from the internet, so whatever bias is in that's going to come in. That's one way, right? That's only the first way here. There's actually lots of other ways. It's how the algorithm is built. And most of these AIs are written by young white guys living in California.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not thinking about a global audience and cultural sensitivity and diversity and all that stuff. They don't even think about it. And so that's the human bias, I suppose. But the algorithmic bias is more how you weigh things and how you question things. You just if they're just scraping the web and accepting it all as and investing nothing and cleaning up the data set, I think that's another thing here, and just saying, oh, it's fine as it is, and we don't have to test it. We don't have to build any kind of validation into our algorithms. We'll just grab and accept what's there. I think those are all really, really great points that lots of experts are saying we got to take care of this now before it gets really, really bad. And they're not investing much. These AI companies are not investing much in this. And so what I guess what I'm getting around to saying is, what I really like is that it's not afraid to critique itself. And I really wondered if it would be able to do that, but it did it, in a fairly devastating way, But what's neat about this format is that it's proving what a good job it can do by criticizing itself. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's sort of so crazily self-referential that way,
Yeah. That's an excellent thing. Gordon, I'm going to just, if I can summarize kind of from your afterword, and from reading it, basically, especially these 4 things that AI is good at in your experience in it. You've said generating ideas. So you just kind of throw what's out there to get ideas for your white paper. I think that's terrific. Making outlines, which is that's amazing. And because that takes a lot of work and a lot of thought to just make that clear. AI is good at that. Doing research, which we've just shown, it's like having an assistant. It's amazing. Having a pretty smart assistant with a good memory. And finally, generating first drafts, because that's the hardest part in writing. If you can just get something down, you can work with it. But man, sometimes it's slow. So anyway, so AI is good. Is that four things? Four things definitely as a tool. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, if we're trying to be positive, I think, as I said before, I think it's 10 times as fast as a human. And that was an interesting list you did. And that's the whole front end, right? That's the whole front end process of doing a white paper. And I don't know about you, Brian, but I've found over the years, researching white papers has gotten slower and slower. And I would think sometimes, geez, I'm getting old. Like I used to do this faster. Like, why is this taking me days to research this thing? And
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. It's because I think it's because the web has expanded. There is so much stuff out there. You have to wade through so much more stuff now. There's so many sources that almost say what you want them to say, but don't quite say it, or don't get around to it, or point to somebody else, or are actually just referencing each other and going around in a circle, and there's no original source. I'm finding the research is really slow and frustrating. And to have a robot, a buddy, a machine that can zoom in through all that stuff and pull out like the stuff to help build an argument is great. I think that is just fantastic. And I was afraid it couldn't do it, but I found it could with Bing. So I think even despite the fact that this whole paper is set up is like, why can't it do it? I think it's very, very quickly going to become a very valuable helper for generating long form content.
So basically, you can see why that this white paper is proof that there really is a future for AI doing white papers, like starting now. We don't have to wait.
Yeah. And this is the easy one. This is the easy one, the numbered list. But I'm going to do a problem solution, and I'm going to do a backgrounder, and have the prompts, keep all the prompts, and have a way to show people how to do that.
Yeah. All
and
right.
They may have to do some research. Sorry,
I'm stepping on you, Gordon. So this is all right. So this is a two-parter. So Gordon and I right now we're pretty glowing. We've said a lot of positive things about AI, the AI white paper. So we're gonna have a second video. It'll be up shortly after this one, and we're gonna talk about the negatives and some things to look out for and some things that really fall short. So if you haven't yet, you want to get Gordon's the white paper and the analysis at the end. Subscribe to his email list. There's a link below, and we will talk to you soon.